any, in quotes, good white people until the Civil Rights Movement came about. I didn't know that some of the young white kids my age felt very, very restricted and oppressed until I met them years later. I remember going to a picnic in Central Park when I lived in New York City. It was billed as the Way Up North in Mississippi picnic. And I saw the little ad at the bottom of the page that the New York Times used to run. It said, y'all call Mississippi picnic. So this friend of mine from college, John Hatch, and I decided to go. It was in Central Park. We saw all these people there. And I was going from one to the other, like trying to find, I'm a sociologist, which is a good word for a snoop. So, I was asking them, like, where are you from? I mean, in Mississippi. I remember this one girl I met who was from Hattiesburg, and she said she was in musical theater. She was on Broadway, in Broadway plays. And she said, I asked her, one question I asked her was, do you ever go back to Hattiesburg? And she said, I go back long enough to see my family, go to church, First Baptist Church on Sunday, sing the Lord's Prayer exactly as they demand it be sung, and then I leave. But I met all these people, gay and straight, intellectuals, and others who just couldn't bear being told how to think, how to behave. So it was then that I became aware of the fact that not everyone really agreed with what was going on. As one white girl I know, Hattiesburg, told me, we were more afraid of the Klan, perhaps than you were. And they too lived under the same kind of tyranny. But the one area in which we disagree is, why didn't they stand up and speak out? Why did I have to be judged and treated entirely on the basis of my skin color? It said nothing, or very little, about who I was or who you were. So our parents couldn't fortify us against the knives of injustices and the knowledge that our skin color and our social class were the reasons for our oppression. But we in the movement felt that we had to fight to keep the children of the next generation, our own children, from having to undergo these same things. I was very fortunate to have been closely mentored by several Mississippi martyrs. I mentioned Medgar Evers already, who was murdered, gunned down. The other was Vernon Dahmer, who took my sister and me to statewide NAACP meetings when we were 13 and 14 years old. His sister was my mother's best friend, and she knew that we had an interest in what we call Negro rights. So they would drive us kids. Always remember to pick up a child along the way and mentor them. But they would drive us kids 90 miles to Jackson. Took 3 hours in the car. This was before interstates. And the other person in that car always was Clyde Kennard. Clyde Kennard was a man, young black man, who had gone to university, been a paratroop in the Korean War, went to the University of Chicago. His father died. He had to go back to Hattiesburg to help his mother on the farm. He wanted to finish his education. And so he applied to Mississippi Southern College, which is now USM that you guys play. And he applied 3 times. The last time, the police put some whiskey in his car. Mississippi being a dry state, he was arrested for illegal liquor. And he was accused of having received and stolen property. It was a very small group of them. Miss Baker was then went on to become the executive director of the SCLC. Now, one thing she would talk about a lot was those preachers. She couldn't stand black preachers because she said they were the most. Because, you know, working for the SCLC, and you can imagine working for them there in the 50s.
Yeah.
All the preachers who told women what to do.
That's right.
And she didn't abide that. She didn't tolerate it. So, the SCLC, particularly Dr. King, was so impressed with these students who were sitting in all over the South. that he wanted to have a conference of those students. And they organized the conference at her alma mater, Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina, on Easter weekend in 1960. And it was out at that time that King wanted the students to be an arm, a youth arm of the SCLC. Ms. Baker told them, you students should do what you want to do. And they voted to become independent. And of course the preachers didn't like her for that either. But it was very, very important because the first elected chairman of SNCC was Mayor Marion Barry of Washington, D.C. He was a doctoral student in chemistry at the University of Tennessee at the time in Knoxville. Marion was married in '78 now. He just got out of the hospital in D.C. He has a kidney transplant. And he's been ailing a lot here of late. So keep him in your prayers. But I really don't like the fact that people think more about him smoking crack on TV than for the entire career that he had of building the largest black middle class in the country in Washington when he was mayor. He gave more jobs, created more economic development programs for people of color than one can imagine. And he is not known for that. And even today, if you talk to Marion, so I recently talked to him, one question is, Joyce, how are the people doing? He never, the people meaning the poor people, he never ever enriched himself. He made a lot of other people like Bob Johnson of BET, very, very rich, Kathy Hughes, very wealthy, but he never cared about money himself. So as you think about in your prayers, please lift him up. But I had the opportunity as a very young person to work with other young people, like, as I said, Bob Moses, Stokely Carmichael, and Miss Hamer was older than us, but she was young at the time. John Lewis, who's now in Congress, and Julian Bond, and many, many others. I don't mention them because they're famous or well-known, but because I want to show you young people today that you can fight for your beliefs and still end up in Congress. John Lewis has become known as the moral conscience of the Congress. Or you can become a noted historian like Julian, or work for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting like Jennifer Lawson, or make a great film series such as Eyes on the Prize like Judy Richardson. We were like you. We were like you young people are today, no different. The only difference is that we found a calling. As the Algerian psychiatrist Frantz Fanon said, each generation must find its mission, fulfill it or betray it. We were ordinary young people doing extraordinary things. We didn't know we would change the course of history, but we surely knew that we would do everything possible to try. We didn't think in broad terms about one day the society is going to be so different and so on. We were fighting one battle at a time. Community service is the rent you pay for being on earth. That you had to have a strong belief in something. We learned in our homes and schools and churches that beliefs aren't worth very much if you're not willing to stand up for them. So having the courage of our convictions was the most important thing that defined us. We may have gotten away from it today, but we must find ways to get back to it. We cannot continue to stand by and watch our children alter when we could just step in and say, that's wrong, you shouldn't be calling a girl a hoe. That's right. Or that's wrong, you shouldn't be fighting. Or what, instead of saying, doing the negative, I would like to talk to you about what your forebears went through. I want to give you some Black history lessons, informally, here in my living room right now. Sit down, let me talk to you about what they experienced and how you can pick up the mantle. We may have gotten away from all of this, but we must find our way back there. We must find ways to re-embrace the ideals and the positive messages that we embraced and the strong convictions. How else can we teach our children to grow up and to thrive if it's not based on a sound system of values that are devoid of being self-centered, or very self-indulgent, or narcissistic, that we see in a lot of young entertainers today? How can we get Lil Wayne or Jay-Z to step up and lead a protest against the murders of young black men in Florida? How can we get Rihanna to fund self-esteem education programs for young girls? Because it would certainly necessarily require that she stop doing some of what she does. How else can we restore our communities to good health if we do not teach the value of mutual respect and interdependence and uplifting those who need it most? Some of our young people appear as if they're separated from their own spirits. But we can help them to get back there and find their way. It was these values of kinship and family, responsibility, and religion that served as the foundation of the movement. And for those leaders like Martin Luther King, and Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Ella Baker, Dorothy Cotton, Andy Young, and many others. In all his eloquence, Dr. King voiced his strong sentiments in a speech he gave at Abbott House in 1965 when he said, I quote, "For no other group in American life is the matter of family more important than to the Negro. Our very survival is bound up in it. No one in all history had to fight against so many physical and psychological horrors to have a family life, as did we. Our families held on to each other at all costs, and our communities fought to remain intact when all else was against them. It is that same struggle for family that we see in the movie 12 Years a Slave, when Simon Northrop longs to be reunited with his wife and children after he's been sold into slavery as a free man. And it is the same struggle that we see each day in our neighbors and friends who are trying to hold it all together and make a way out of no way, despite the difficulties they face.